work as well either. So how do we prevent my 11-year-old, my 9-year-old, my kids, my gaggle, and his kids, how do we prevent them from falling in that same mindset? And then, like a good conservative, I looked at this and said, you know what? I didn't just come around in 1981 and there wasn't any other human history for me to fall on, right? My grandparents did it. My parents did it. We have tradition to draw from. We have traditional institutions to draw from. So why don't we look at how we've done it in the past? And what we see throughout history is that from the time that a kid is younger to the time they're older, we're preparing them to go out into the community and be more activist and have an activist mindset. So that's what we're going to talk to you a little bit about tonight. He starts it off. We have not rehearsed this, so it might be a little awkward at moments. So,
as I said, this is kind of a unique talk, a unique perspective that we're dealing with tonight. Real quick, I kind of brushed over my biography. Just wanted to touch on a few things. Coincidentally, a decade removed, my story was similar to his in that I was going to be deployed 2012 to 2013. We had our youngest son was about our oldest son was about a year old, and we found out that our youngest son was to be born, and we found out just a month or two before I was deployed, and he was actually born while I was deployed. Thankfully, I had the opportunity to come home for 2 weeks emergency leave to be there for the birth and spend the first 2 weeks of his life with him before I had to go finish my tour for a couple months. In addition, he mentioned a little bit of his background and talking about the looking at the past, looking at historical, what's been going on. His background is in political science. He's got a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in teaching history. I am working towards being an Army chaplain, so I have my bachelor's degree in pastoral ministry, and I'm working on my master's degree in chaplaincy. And so, once again, just interesting perspectives. We both grew up in the church. He's been more in the political realm, and I'm working to be a chaplain. So, kind of those, dual, and some would say, clashing perspectives. But we'll see how it works. So, what we have up here is how do we respond to culture? This is going to, be kind of the framework that we talk about tonight. Historically, there's 3 ways that we can, traditionally respond to culture. We can receive it, we can reject it, or we can redeem it. Now we're going to talk about tonight on individual cultural elements and whether we should individually decide what to do with individual aspects of culture. But historically, we've seen that certain groups have done one or the other. They've either wholesale accepted culture or wholesale rejected it. So we have groups that have just rejected everything. Everything that's outside of the church, everything that's quote-unquote secular, everything that isn't related to Christianity, we're just going to reject, have nothing to do with it. And that kind of separatist movement, if you will, where we really begin to see the gap, the secular-sacred gap widening, that divide widening between the church and the world. And the other side of that is that there are some groups that just say, no, we're going to accept everything that the culture has to offer us. God created this world. He created everything in it. It's for our enjoyment, with no sense of, decision-making or, consideration. We're just going to accept it. Now, we see biblically, we're called to be in the world, but not of the world. And so you see in this paradigm, either receiving or rejecting, that what people have done is they've kind of favored one side or the other. They've said, I'm going to be in the world, right? And so they said, everything that's in the world is fine. And then we have this other side that says, no. We're not supposed to be of the world. And so they just reject everything. But we see in Scripture that it is that balance. We're to be in the world, but also be separate, but also be not of the world. And so we've seen this on a macro level. We've seen one or the other. Now, the third, the idea of redemption, is what we're going to talk about today. We've already talked about it is not a proper paradigm to just reject everything that the world has to offer, or just to accept everything that the world has to offer. So what does that look like? And we'll look at that on a micro level.
All right, now I'm going to talk about the macro level as far as politics is concerned. You know, I think too often, and I know this is in my life, I think too often as Christians we try to, again, separate that which was in the political culture and that's within the Christian church culture, the religious culture. We try to separate those out. But we know that we are all intertwined beings, right? We don't just have, you know, one mindset for the spiritual, one mindset for the mental, etc. We're intertwined. Everything's connected. So when it comes to how does this look from a political macro view, okay? So from a macro view, the receiving end would be kind of how some people treat pop culture. Pop culture doesn't really matter. Hollywood's liberal, big deal. You know, the stuff that we watch, you know, we want to watch Modern Family and it's funny. So it doesn't matter what kind of worldview messages or political messages it's conveying to us or our children, whatever. We're just going to receive it. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's separate from our political viewpoints. The macro level for the political element of rejection is I'm only going to hang out with those who I agree with, or more importantly, who agree with me. Because if they don't agree with me, that's their problem. And I'm only going to talk to those kind of people. I'm only going to, you know, follow those kind of people on Facebook. I'm going to follow those kind of people on Twitter. And I'm going to insulate myself to my own political viewpoint. I'm only going to watch Fox News, you know, all those other, you know, it's all the devil. If it's not on Fox News, it's not on Blaze TV, it doesn't exist, okay? It is not worth consuming, all right? Well, what is the happy medium there? How does the redeeming those elements look like for us? For us, I think it looks like the rational discourse view that our founding fathers took, right? They didn't agree with everything that John Locke said, but they took the elements that they believed to be true and what he was saying was truth, capital T truth in there, and they pulled that out, put that into the Constitution and their writings. They didn't agree with everything that Hobbes said, but they pulled out what was applicable. Same thing with Montesquieu and Plato, Aristotle, right? They didn't agree with all these philosophies wholesale, but what they did is they put them through a prism, and we'll talk about that in the micro view. They put them through a prism of, is this redeemable? Is this something that can apply to us? And they talked about it. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams hated each other. Sorry if that burst your bubble. I apologize. We tend to think that our founding fathers just all loved each other. It was just a good old time. I mean, when they got in a room, it was just, you know, just happiness, fairy tales, and rainbows. That's not the case, right? Thomas Jefferson and John Adams literally hated each other. And we like to talk about how our politics has turned so mean. It's so mean. It's just mean, Jeremiah. It is mean. Our founding fathers, they would have never been mean. I dare you to go read some of the writings in the newspapers during that day when Thomas Jefferson was running against John Adams. All right? It's not just mean. It's downright crude. All right? Alleged affairs, people sleeping with their moms. I mean, you're reading this stuff, you're like, oh my goodness, this is like a British tabloid, right, of the day. It's really mean, you know. We don't like to talk about that. It kind of ruins the mood, but these were people. But at the end of the day, they also believed in rational discourse. And they did believe that they needed to come together and talk about these things. So that's kind of how that looks like on a political macro level. I'm going to introduce it. All right, so on a micro level, What we're going to do is we're going to take all these different cultural elements, all these things that we